Tiga.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Miss Tatu. So, in this time, we will presenting our journal about the impact of existence of childhood trauma on teenagers. But before that, first of all, let us introducing ourselves. My name is FIRDA Amalia, and my partner name is HAFIDZA KARIM.
And we are going first with abstract. Childhood trauma can result in serious problems in the future. A traumatic experience that individuals grow up with can affect their personality development. There is a need to raise awareness of the existence of trauma, explore understanding of its impacts, and highlight the importance of maintaining stable childhood life to prevent trauma. The research methodology involves a literature study with data collected from books and journals related to the topic presented. The results conclude that a substantial 74% of challenges encouraged during teenagers stem from social relationships, academics, and self-image, while the remaining 26% trace back to childhood trauma. Trauma can manifest in altered behavior, heightened stress levels, and increased aggression. Next.
Okay, thank you, Hafka. So next we are going to talk about introduction. The introduction of this journal is trauma is a general term used by society to describe unpleasant and frightening experience. The existence of trauma is independent of subject and time. In other words, it can affect anyone at any time, including childhood. Trauma can be the root of serious problems for an individual in the future because the development and behavior that grow with traumatic experience can be rooted and embedded in the development of their personality, based on Irwanto and Kumala 2020. However, it's apparent that childhood trauma is still often overlooked due to a lack of understanding of the non-physical nature of trauma. The purpose of the author's choice of the topic is to raise people's awareness of the existence of trauma, which is not something to be taken lightly. Many people are familiar with mental health issues, but many are still unaware of the existence of trauma within themselves and its impact. The author tries to make people aware of the importance of maintaining the stability of childhood life and avoiding factors that cause trauma, both mild and severe, so that the development and formation of personality in individual teenagers is well maintained and stable. Based on Brigitte Erlita's 2020 research in the psychological impact of childhood trauma on adolescents shows that childhood trauma can have a major impact on teenagers. Trauma can take many forms. This includes physical and sexual abuse, neglect, rejection, and the experience of being separated from a loved one. The result of this study suggests that there is a relationship between childhood trauma and their personality in teenagers. Furthermore, trauma is one of the mental health conditions that are in need of greater community attention.
And next, we are going to literature review. There are three literature review. The first, we are going to childhood trauma, then we are going to teenagers, and the last we are going the impact. The first, we are going to definition of trauma. Trauma is a response to something or someone from an event that is unpleasant and causes fear. It is unpleasant and causes anxiety. Trauma is Latin means would, which describe an event or human experience in response to an event. Irwanto and Kumala 20 and 20. Next, we are going to complex trauma. Complex trauma, as defined by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, is the exposure of children to multiple traumatic events that are typically in phases and interpersonal in nature and results in widespread long-term effect of exposure to trauma. Another terms that define the repeated exposure of children and teenagers to potentially traumatic events resulting from the behavior of trusted person or adults in the life of the teenagers in development trauma. And we're going to cause of childhood trauma. An individual may experience trauma as the result of acute single incidents or as a result of repeated of chronic exposure to an accident, APA 2000. Some of the most influential factors in the development of trauma are physical, sexual, verbal, and emotional abuse, neglect, separation, like death or divorce, and family rejection, HITRDA 2018. We are going to the second literature review about teenager. We are going to definition of teenager. Teenager is the initial period when a person becomes an adult, or in the other words, early adulthood. A teenager is a time when a person experiences a transitional period, both physically and psychologically. Teenagers will face various problems and go through phases of cycle, cognitive, and psychosocial change. And the last about our literature review. And the next our literature review about traumatized teenager behavior. In general, teenagers who have experienced trauma tend to show behaviors or symptoms such as high or excessive anxiety, low self-control with high emotional levels, low levels of concentration and self-concept, low self-motivation, and a tendency to have problems with their social environment. Children or teenagers who are traumatized will find it difficult to concentrate and will feel that they have lost their sense of self. This is because the trauma experience as a child causes a person to feel a loss of self-image, especially if the trauma is caused by sexual abuse. And the last, there are literature review about impact. Impact of childhood trauma on teenager. The effects of childhood trauma tend to be variable. They can vary depending on the cause of the trauma. However, it's common for teenagers who grow up with childhood trauma from any cause to exhibit aggressive behavior, feelings of fear, lack of self-confidence, loss of self-esteem, and excessive anxiety when confronted with conditional or even that reminds them of their childhood trauma. Another effect is post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, which is likely to be a pressure to others' mental illness such as bipolar disorder and such. And we are going to methodology. The research use literature study based on journals and articles related to the topic presented.
Okay, after Hafka presented about literature review and methodology, um, I will go to talk about result and finding. So based on Hasanah and Ambarani 20, uh, 2018 in the psychological impact of childhood trauma on adolescents, journal conducted a study that concluded that the risk of psychological problem in teenagers is driven by the cause of past trauma. In addition to environmental and genetic factors, trauma is another factor that influences the development of a person's personality state. Trauma is invisible. Individuals cannot choose whether they can suffer trauma or not. The quality of teenagers depends on the quality and things that have happened during childhood. Based on a study conducted by Hitterdai 2018, the data shows that out of 154 teenagers who experience personal problems. 74% of the problems arose in teenagers because of problem with social relationship, academics, and the search for self-image. And 26% of the teenagers' problem arose since childhood or childhood trauma. A person can suffer from trauma because of an unpleasant even or bad experience. This can make a person want to avoid being in the same situation. a day. The causes of trauma can be varied and include violence, sexual abuse, ostracism, accidents, and other bad events, based on the result of a research study by McLean in the journal The Long-Term Impact of Childhood Trauma, written by Hirdai 2018 on childhood trauma with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, or we can say BPD. The study shows that adults experience BPD consists of 80, 81% of people with acute childhood trauma. 71% have been subjected to physical violence. 67% are victims of sexual abuse, and 62% have witnessed domestic violence. Victims of childhood trauma, particularly sexual abuse and domestic violence, often grow up to be perpetrators of the same crime. Data show that 75% of sex offenders were sexual abused. Based on Friedman on Heather 2080, that teenagers who suffer from PTSD due to trauma tend to manifest their trauma disorder through symptoms of emotional dysregulation, such as aggressive behavior, difficulty concentrating, recklessness, self harm, excessive shock response, memory and brain or cognitive dysfunction, and sleep difficulties. Okay, next, the last topic, we will talk about conclusion. The conclusion of the journal is from all the data collected by the author. He concludes that the presence of childhood trauma in teenagers has a significant impact on their life and personality development. The effect of trauma that is most common in adolescents is mental damage, personality, and teenage life. Teenagers don't have the power to choose or refuse to be traumatized because this trauma is essentially born accidentally out of events experienced by teenagers, especially events in their childhood. The data show that the biggest source of trauma for young people is their own family. Violence and even sexual abuse experienced by teenagers is perpetrated by family and close adults. Teenagers who have experienced trauma show symptoms such as excessive anxiety and shock, acute depression, uncontrollable emotion, aggression, etc., which, if too severe, can lead to suicide. Complex trauma in teenagers lead to teenagers developing excessive vigilance as a response to the fear of the trauma they have experienced, with symptoms of ADHD in the form of distraction or pure concentration, difficulty identifying and managing emotion, affective dysregulation, uncontrolled and overly controlled behavior, deviance, difficulty getting along with peers, rejection, or apathy. It based on Eric J. 2014 argument. Okay, so that's all about our presentation about our journal that talk about the impact of childhood trauma on teenager. Sorry for the weaknesses. Thank you so much for Mr. Tatu and you all guys. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
wabarakatuh.